bismuth shot shells are nothing new, but they got off to a really bad start in the 90s because the individual bismuth pellets were just too brittle at the time. The pellets that didn't split when they left the barrel would often fall apart on impact with a bird. For the first 10 years of use, bismuth was just too brittle for most hunters to take seriously. Basically, the only hunters using those old bismuth loads were the duck hunters that were still using the older shotguns that couldn't handle steel shot. But things have changed drastically in the world of bismuth shot shells, and better tin alloying has resulted in bismuth pellets that hold together pretty damn good. But bismuth still wasn't considered better than lead. Fast forward to today, where lead bans are everywhere, and a lot of public land can't even be hunted with lead anymore. Also consider that more hunters today are just not happy about having lead particles in their food. Even steel started losing favor due to poor kill results on birds and, broken teeth while you're eating your wild game. In this new environment, bismuth has recently become the darling of the wing shooting world. I first heard about Boss shot shells sometime in early 2019, and Boss really came out of the gates running with their marketing campaign, which in retrospect was a little bit over the top. They seem to target the dude, broad generation in a big way. And what usually happens when you rely on that type of marketing is that the type of people susceptible to it are usually not very credible. I mean, guys were making wild claims of, 100+ yard shots on ducks. And one guy even claimed to have fired 300 shots of Boss shot shells and killed 300 ducks. I mean, it was pretty bad. And it was that type of marketing and the user base that that marketing attracted that kind of turned me off of Boss shot shells. I live in California, so I'd already been using bismuth for a good while, but I stayed away from the Boss stuff. And to add insult to injury, their little virtue signaling incident on social media following George Floyd's death really turned a lot of hunters off of their product for a while, including me. And in retrospect, that was a really dumbass move by Boss. By 2021, bismuth was completely mainstream, and bismuth shells could be found on the shelves of every sporting goods store in the country. Towards the end of the 2021 season, I ran out of the Kent bismuth number 5 loads I was using for pheasant, and I couldn't find any more of it online. So I ordered 5 boxes of Boss shells, and I was just 100% happy with the results on that. Even though they come in boxes of 20, the price per shell was still cheaper before. So in 2022, I decided to use Boss shot shells for everything. I ordered cases of their shells for doves, for ducks, for quail, for chucker, and for pheasant hunting. And, hype aside, I found their customer service and fair pricing to be an excellent attribute of the company. So I bought all these shells with the goal of cutting through the hype and giving my viewers an honest and objective review of Boss shot shells. I also appreciate that Boss makes everything in the USA, and I found the company very easy to like. I do all of my upland hunting with 20 gauge and just about all of my waterfowl hunting with a 12 gauge. Because I'm mostly an upland hunter and do very little waterfowl hunting each year, this video will mostly be about upland loads. For doves, I ordered a case of 20 gauge number 7s. For quail and chucker, I ordered a case of 20 gauge 3-inch number 6s. For pheasants, I ordered a case of 20 gauge number 5s, and this is for pheasant and grouse. And for decoy ducks, I ordered the 3-inch Magnum number 5s in 12 gauge. This should cover all of my wing shooting needs for 2022. My goal is to properly pattern these shells and then give you an honest evaluation of their performance in actual field conditions. I then want to break these shells down, run them through some testing, and compare Bosch shot shells to other competing bismuth brands. This video is going to be the most objective and comprehensive video of Bosch shot shells that you've ever seen, so get ready for a long video. This is the type of pattern I'd settled on for most of my Boss loads. It has decent pattern density and dispersion, but patterns like this are rarely achieved by luck with Bosch shot shells. I had to test out several different chokes with most guns. Compared to lead and steel and Kent bismuth, the Bosch shot shells were harder to properly pattern in my experience. And I immediately noticed that Bosch shot shells can be very sensitive to chokes. So it's worth it, in my opinion, to pattern with several different sizes and brands of chokes in order to get that great pattern that you're looking for. Just be mindful, that bismuth likes tighter chokes than steel. Usually a preferred pattern that you get with a modified choke in steel will need a full choke with bismuth to get the same results. You can see right here, this was achieved with an improved modified. And that's about the same type of pattern I get with an improved cylinder at 30 yards with steel. So with the Bosch shells, be patient. It's a little bit harder to find a good patterning combination. Also, don't be shocked if you witness some pellet fragmentation. As I've stated several times in my Hunt Camp Mail episodes, I noticed that Bosch shot shells, at least my Bosch shot shells, were harder to pattern than any other bismuth loads I've ever used. And these Bosch shot shells are extremely sensitive to chokes. My Kent bismuth loads pattern way better than these Bosch shot shells ever did. And I couldn't figure out why. And as you know, my hunting buddy Nubs also ordered several cases of Bosch shells for him to use this season. And Nubs indicated that his shells were very easy to pattern and they pattern great. So I stole several of his shells while he wasn't looking, and I patterned them in my Beretta A400 Extreme Plus, and his shells patterned way better than mine. And the only difference between his shells and my shells were that Nubs was shooting the 2 3/4 inch Bosch shells, and I'm shooting the 3-inch Bosch shells and everything. So I cut open some of my Bosch shells for a more detailed inspection and to find out why my 3-inch shells pattern much worse than the 2 3/4 inch shells. And I think I discovered the problem. Boss uses a 2 3/4 inch wad in their 3-inch shells. And in these 12 gauge shells right here, you could see that a lot of the shot is sitting outside and above the cup. And if you look at these 20 gauge 3-inch shells, I don't know if you could see down in there, you could see that probably more than 1/3 of the shot is outside and above the shot cup. So for comparison, I opened up one of my 3-inch Kent bismuth shells, And these are the shells that pattern really good out of just about all my guns and like just about all my chokes. And you could see in there that Kent uses a full length wad made for these 3-inch shells, made for their 3-inch shells. So once again, we're comparing apples to apples here. These are both 12 gauge, 3-inch, number 5 bismuth loads with 1.5 ounce payload in it. And you can see that Boss uses what appears to be a Cheddite wad designed for 2 3/4 inch shells in lead. You know, they're basically using a 2 3/4 inch wad in their 3-inch shells. And you could see that Kent and their bismuth loads, their 3-inch bismuth loads, they're using, it looks like, if you can read the writing on the bottom, an Italian-made Gelandi wad, and this wad is made for steel or non-toxic shot. And you can see that Kent uses a full-size wad in their 3-inch shells, and this is specifically designed for non-toxic. So that's the difference in wads. Having most of the shot contained in the wad cup is considered mandatory for most non-toxic shot. But I wasn't sure if it really made a difference with bismuth. But my subjective investigation here suggests that bismuth does indeed pattern better in a full-length shot cup. So for future reference, I think that the 2 3/4 inch Boss shells are probably better than the 3-inch Boss shells. And that was a surprising finding for me. So with the bismuth, once you find what you like on the paper patterning board, always shoot your combination on a reactive target, like these Birchwood Casey shoot and see targets. And I really like these large 18-inch ones. The problem with the bismuth is when pellets fragment, bismuth pellets fragment, they're really hard to identify on paper patterning sheets, but they're really easy to identify on these reactive targets. What you'll find with bismuth is that it likes tighter chokes to achieve the correct pattern density and dispersion. What you'll also find is that the tighter chokes also cause more pellet fragmentation with bismuth. Take a look at these two reactive targets. These are both Boss 20 gauge number 5s shot from the bench at 25 yards. This target was shot with an improved cylinder choke, and this target over here was shot with a modified choke. The improved cylinder choke has too much shot dispersion for my taste at 25 yards, but it doesn't have that many fractured pellets in the kill zone either. I mean, you could see a few. That's probably a fractured pellet. That is, maybe that is right there. So there's a few fractured pellets in it, but really not that much in the kill zone anyways. When you move over here to the target with the modified choke, the pattern density on this and dispersion look great for 25 yards, but we're starting to see some pellet fragmentation in the kill zone on this one. You can see one right there, right there, right here, right here, right here, right here. All of this area down here, I mean, there's a lot of fragmented pellets in here, right there. You know, admittedly, this isn't a lot of pellet fragmentation, and it's probably nothing to worry about, but this pattern would honestly make most pheasant hunters happy, and it's probably going to kill any bird you shoot at that within 30 yards. But without using reactive targets like this, you probably wouldn't even notice this fragmentation at all. So, and lastly, when you're finally done patterning your load, go out and shoot some clays when you're done. That way you can verify that everything's correct. And at this point, your pattern's on. So if there's any problems when you're out shooting clays, it's a technique or gun fitment issue after that. In my state of California, we have to use non-toxic shot on everything. And I've been using steel number sixes for doves for about the last 8 years. And yeah, I'll admit it, it's not nearly as good as lead was, but that's the law and I had to learn to deal with it. So I started, for 2022, I decided to use the Boss Bismuth number sevens on dove. And admittedly, when I went dove hunting with the Boss number sevens this year, I wasn't really impressed with these shells, to be honest with you. They seem to be no better than the cheap steel loads I was using before. And on birds over 30 yards away, most of the doves seemed to laugh and kept flying away when I hit them with these Boss number sevens. So I really didn't see an improvement over the number six steel I was using before. So I'm going out dove hunting in the morning and tomorrow morning. And yes, it's supposed to be freezing out there, so I'm bringing the mittens. It's supposed to be down in the low 20s. But my main goal is to test out these Boss 3-inch number sevens on the doves. And even though these are about twice the price of the cheap steel dove loads, if they kill 3 times as many doves, it'll be worth it. But I want to see the lethality on doves, so I'm using an over and under because it lets me basically test 2 chokes at the same time. So, well, I did the Boss number sevens today, and go ahead and clean these birds up and do a little post-mortem analysis here and see how well these Boss pellets penetrated on these birds. So I shot 12 doves this morning in about an hour, and then basically the little dove action quit here. It's only from about 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning, and that's a pretty small window, but that's late season dove hunting. But I shot 12 birds today, and I would say probably about 5 of them went down crippled, and I had to snap their necks, which is pretty typical with steel too. But post-op analysis here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 breasts out of 12 have absolutely no pellet holes in them at all. Nothing. No damage to it. I'm assuming an errant pellet probably hit the head and took it down, or it was, maybe I got the wing or something and it was crippled, but that's not very good right there. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doves were hit with 1 or 2 pellets. I'd say 3 of these have 1 pellet in them, and 3 of them have 2 pellets in them. And only 1 dove had more than 1 pellet in it. I think this one has 5. I think what this tells me is with these Boss number sevens, a modified choke probably isn't enough. I probably need to go up to an improved modified, or maybe even a full. And none of these were far shots. I don't take risky wounding shots on doves. All of them were in that 15 to 30 yard range. So, I would say it's maybe on par with steel, but I'll go out again, maybe tomorrow, maybe next weekend, and I'll choke this thing all the way up to full and see how that does. Well, I'm at the exact same spot that I was yesterday. I'm a little late this morning, probably about a half hour later than I should be, but I do see some doves flying, and just for good measure, I put out a couple of spinning lucky doves, and hope that helps my odds here, even though I'm late. But I'm out this morning basically to change up chokes, and today I'm going to try a modified and improved modified combo, and then an improved modified and full combo with that Boss 3-inch number 7 and 20 gauge, and see if it does a little bit better on the doves with the tighter choke. So I did something interesting today. I started the morning with a combination of a light modified and improved modified choke and separated those birds, and then finished the day with a combination of an improved modified and a full choke to finish the day off, and I separated those birds so I can kind of do a post-op analysis here. And to tell you the truth, there's like no penetration on any of these breasts. I mean, this one right here, it looks like it's got two holes in it, and one looks all the way through. But none of these other breasts have a hole in it. And then the full choke, these breasts are basically virgin, untouched. You know, when I hunt with number 6 steel shot, I'm used to these breasts having pellets penetrate all the way through them, but it's just not happening with this bismuth. And it seems like the tighter I choke this thing, the less pellet penetration I'm getting. I mean, maybe the bismuth pellets are breaking up or something in the choke when it's too tight. I don't know. You know, I have no idea, but it's very odd. And just to let you know, that shotgun was patterned with those Briley chokes, and all the hits felt good. Felt like I was right on. Felt like my leads were right. I had my shot cam on my gun today, so I'll review that shot cam footage, and it should reveal that I was pretty close to right on. But the results on doves, on late season doves, with these Boss 3-inch number 7s are kind of weird. Oh, and just like yesterday, to let you know, I probably had to snap about half these birds' necks because they hit the ground still breathing. So, I mean, I'm honestly not seeing these Boss number 7 shells on doves as being a huge improvement over steel. And they're definitely not an improvement over lead dove shot. That's for sure. In the end, when you factor in the high volume of shells used while you're dove hunting, cheap steel shot makes more sense for dove hunting, in my opinion. The Boss number 7s really didn't seem any better than the steel I was using before. And at 1/3 the cost, cheap steel shells are better fit for dove hunting, in my opinion. With dove hunting, cost is definitely one of the most important factors, and boss number sevens offered no advantage, in my opinion. I used the 3-inch boss number sixes and 20 gauge for quail and chucker this season. And I believe I did see a slight improvement over the steel loads I was using before. You know, we're always shooting quail while they're flushing away, and shooting through those backs full of winter plumage without destroying that tender meat wasn't easy with steel. You were either going too hard on them with 4s or 5, or a little bit too soft on them with the 6 or 7. So quail really need a delicate balance between good penetration and not blowing up those precious little breasts. And I think the Boss number 6 shot shells were the perfect balance of those attributes. I basically hunted in 100-degree heat to sub-freezing weather this year with these number 6s. And these 3-inch Boss number 6s did great this season. With the number 5 and number 6 steel shot that I was using for years before, I had to break the necks on many of the quail I'd dropped because, that didn't put them out of their misery. With the number 6 Boss, I don't think I needed to break as many necks. This might make the Boss number 6s worth that extra cost. And I'd say that I'm pretty satisfied with the Boss number 6s. And they're a huge improvement over the Boss number 7s. I've actually been using bismuth on pheasants for years. I'd use the cheaper steel number 4s for reserve pheasants and the bismuth for the wild pheasants. But in the past, the Kent bismuth number 5 was my go-to load for pheasants. But this year, I went all Boss bismuth number 5s for pheasant hunting. I started off the year by hunting reserve pheasants to see how they worked. I didn't want to transition to wild birds without being sure that the Boss shells, did their job. But boy, was I impressed. As the year progressed, it became clear that these 3-inch Boss number 5s were deadlier than anything I've used since the lead days. I don't think I could tell the difference between lead and these Boss shells on those birds. The 3-inch number 5 Boss shot shells just crushed every rooster I pulled the trigger on this year. Out of this whole Boss shot shell experience, the number 5s on pheasant was my favorite by far. The number 5s and 20 gauge are one of the best pheasant loads I think I've ever used. I've used Kent bismuth on ducks in the past, and I thought it did a little bit better than steel, especially on those farther away birds. But like with dove hunting, I never really considered the huge added expense of bismuth as being worth it. Although duck hunting isn't the high volume shooting that dove hunting is, it still requires a lot of shells to be fired every season, and you could quickly price yourself out of a hobby with duck hunting really fast. But I feel like the Bosch shells really bridge the price gap between bismuth loads and premium steel loads. These Bosch shells for my 12 gauge are only 30 cents more per shell than the Winchester Drylocks I was using. Personally, I feel like that 30 cents per shell is worth it if I get better performance on ducks. And I honestly felt like these 12 gauge Bosch shells did better than the steel number 4s I was using before over decoy ducks. But my plan for next year, this year, next season, is to buy some 12 gauge Bosch shells in number 4 and number 3 to use for ducks and geese. And I'll let you know how those work out next year. To round out my review of Bosch shot shells, I decided to do some penetration testing. If you remembered my VLD bullet reliability test on my old YouTube channel, everyone tried to flame me for using my own homemade ballistics gel. So for this test, I ordered some real FBI certified 10% ballistics gel from Clear Ballistics, and here's the certification for that. I shot these gel blocks from a distance of 30 yards because this is the maximum distance for the upland hunting and ducks over decoy hunting that I do 90% of the time. After shooting these blocks, I measured the penetration depth of as many pellets as I could to get an average depth of penetration. To make things fair, I didn't count any fragmented pellet pieces. As a benchmark, to compare some of the Bosch shells to, I fired a load of Kent Fast Steel number 6s into a gel block. This has been my most utilized dove, quail, and chucker load for probably the last 4 or 5 seasons, and I thought it would be interesting to compare the Bosch number 7 and 6 loads to this load. And this Kent Fast Steel number 6 performed pretty much exactly like I expected at 30 yards. The Kent number 6 Fast Steel penetrated an average depth of 2 1/16 inches at 30 yards, and that's very respectable and plenty enough to kill any dove or quail in my mind. But the most impressive part of this result is how uniformly the Kent Fast Steel penetrated. You could see here, most of this shot is pretty much on the same plane right here. Almost every pellet went to this pretty much the same depth. And as you'll see in the rest of this segment, the Bosch bismuth doesn't penetrate as uniformly as the steel shot did. And this is the Bosch number 7 test result. And I basically bought this for dove hunting as a replacement for the steel number 6s I was previously using. And these Bosch number 7s penetrated an average depth of 1 13/16 inches at 30 yards. You'll notice 2 things here. See if you could see down into this gel. Try to give you the best angle I can here. But if you could see down into this gel, you'll notice 2 things. First of all, the penetration depth is very erratic. I mean, you have full pellets right here and full pellets right here. I mean, it's just kind of, they're all over the place. There's no rhyme and reason to it. It's very erratic. And secondly, what you'll notice is the average depth of penetration is less than the Kent Fast Steel number 6 load. Remember the dove hunting portion of this video where I felt like the number 6 steel kills doves better than this number 7 Boss Bismuth? Well, this seems to confirm that suspicion. And these Boss number 7s really don't impress me. And this is the Boss number 6 test result. And as you can see here, it penetrated an average depth of 2 3/8 inches at 30 yards. And this was actually a pretty solid performer, in my opinion. You know, it penetrates about a ½ inch deeper than the Boss number 7s, and penetration is a lot more uniform, I think. You're also, if you can see if you can get a better view into this block, it's kind of hard because it's got these wrinkles on the surface, but you're actually starting to see a visible permanent wound channel on some of these with the number 6s that just wasn't present in the number 7s. And this is a pretty good result, but you know, when you look at it objectively, it's only marginally better than the Kent Fast Steel number 6s, which are cheaper. And lastly, we have the Boss number 5 shot shell result. The number 5s penetrated an average of 2 7/8 inches at 30 yards. And that's enough to easily kill any duck or pheasant, probably even goose too. And these just had a really well-defined permanent wound channel too, so they're definitely putting more kinetic energy on target. Out of all the Boss shot shells I tried, the number 5s impressed me the most. They put a lot of pellets on target, and those pellets are hitting really hard too. Out of all the Boss shot shells that I tried, the number 5s really did impress me the most. You know, they put a lot of pellets on target, they hit hard, and I'm just a huge proponent of these number 5s, and I definitely think they're worth the money. The number 5s are the most well-rounded shell in the entire Boss line, in my opinion. I think that so far in this video, I've done nothing but state the obvious to you. Modern bismuth loads perform better than steel loads, but they cost more than steel loads. So in reality, Boss is just competing with other bismuth shell manufacturers. In this chapter, we'll compare Boss shot shells to their current main competitors, Kent bismuth and hevi-bismuth. So let me cut up some of these shells, make some range trips, and work the calculator so we can see what bismuth shell is the best for upland hunting. In this chart, I've broken down the shells from all 3 major bismuth brands and meticulously weighed and measured everything. I also went to the range and chronographed these loads to get real muzzle velocity, and this chart is the result of all that work. The first section of this chart right here basically covers pellet quality, and I measured 50 random pellets from each shell to get an average diameter and weight. By American standards, a number 5 shot pellet should have a diameter of 120 thousandths. You can see here that Kent pellets are big, closer to a number 4 pellet. The heavy pellets are actually pretty small, closer to a number 6 pellet. And the Boss pellets are hair over the 20 thousandths, the 120 thousandths spec for a number 5 pellet. So the Boss shells are a true number 5 pellet. So the others are noticeably larger and smaller than the spec right there. Just so you know, a number 4 spec, the spec for number 4 shot, is 130 thousandths. So the Kent is actually closer to that. And number 6 shot spec is 110 thousandths. So hevi-bismuth is actually closer to the number 6 specs. And rather than use standard deviations, I went ahead and used extreme spreads here because I want you to see the full extent of quality. And Boss had the best consistency, and Heavy Shot had the worst consistency here. And weights, when we go to the weight section here, weights are about what you'd expect. The bigger size pellets weigh more, and the smaller heavy pellets weigh less. But the low extreme spread of the Boss weights are pretty impressive. You know, consistency equals quality, and Boss just has the consistency here. If you look at the pellet quality picture here, Boss is the only true to size pellets and has the most consistent size and weight. So it's safe to say that Boss's pellets are of better quality than the other brands. The next part of the chart involves payload. With bismuth shells, this is what you're really paying for. Bismuth isn't cheap, so this is where all that extra money is going. Boss doesn't make a 20 gauge number 5 shell with a 1 ounce payload, so my Boss shells here had a 1 1/8 ounce payload. But basically, if you bought 1 ounce of bismuth and you don't get 1 ounce of bismuth, you have every right to be mad. So let's see if these payloads are as advertised. I'm going to weigh the payload of these shot shells. The hevi-bismuth shot shell has this flaxseed filler in it, and the other ones don't have a filler. So I made the decision that since the filler shouldn't be counted as part of the payload because it isn't responsible for taking down a bird, I'm going to go ahead and sort all the flaxseed out of this and only weigh the bismuth pellets. Now we have all the flaxseed removed from that hevi-bismuth. And that's the real shot charge of that. Seems low. We'll have to run the numbers. 5 grains. And this hevi-bismuth number 5 1 ounce load weighs a lot less. So in these little 20 gauge 2 3/4 inch hevi-bismuth loads in number 5, that's how many pellets you're being shorted. Basically, it's 31.7 grains short of an ounce on pellets. So, I mean, a little 20 gauge, that could be a difference maker right there. So I went ahead and cut open 5 shells of each brand and weighed the payloads, which took forever with hevi-bismuth because I had to separate out all that flaxseed filler. You could see that the Kent and the Boss are pretty close to advertised payloads, with Boss having the slight advantage here. But the heavy shells are shorting you by about 8% bismuth, which isn't good in my opinion. And why the hell would they add all that filler to the shell when they're shorting you that much on pellet weight? I mean, it makes no sense. I have a feeling that the answer might be that flaxseed is a lot cheaper than bismuth. You know, I hope that Heavy isn't deliberately adding flaxseed filler in order to give you a lower than advertised payload of bismuth. You know, this looks very suspicious to me. The next part of the chart down here is performance. In order to put energy on birds, pellets need velocity. But remember, too much velocity is bad with shot shells because patterns fall apart. So shot shell manufacturers need to find a good balance between pattern integrity, velocity, and payload. This isn't easy to do, and it's a very difficult balance to achieve. So these posted manufacturers' velocities right here are usually basically the sweet spot for their load, and you want the actual velocity to be close to these advertised velocities. Before I start shooting loads over my chronograph, let's talk about how accurate chronos are with birdshot, because we really need to discuss this. I used to use my Oler 35 to test shot shells back in the day, which allowed you to get a perfect shotgun setup, but because I own a lab radar and a magnetospeed also, I went ahead and sold my Oler, which in retrospect was a huge mistake. And after I sold that Oler, I found out that my lab radar doesn't read birdshot and that my magnetospeed isn't reliable reading birdshot. So I was forced to use, the old El Cheapo chronos for birdshot. But not all cheap optical chronos are the same. I'll admit it, most of them don't accurately read birdshot. In fact, most of them will read over 100 feet per second faster than the actual velocity because they're confused by the shot length or the shot string. The best El Cheapo chrono that I've ever found for shotguns is the Pro Chrono made by Competition Electronics. Now, I wouldn't use this to find powder nodes for load development with rifle ammunition, but it's a decent shotgun chrono if you set it up right. My buddy has one of the Caldwell chronos, and that thing really doesn't read accurately at all. This thing kicks its butt. Out there. But there are some things that you need to understand when you're using optical chronographs for shot shells. First of all, American ammo manufacturers get their velocity readings 3 feet from the muzzle. That's right. They get their velocity readings for shot shells by the American standard by shooting with the chronograph 3 feet from their muzzle. So if you're setting up your chrono 10 feet from the muzzle, like you would setting up rifle loads, you're going to get a very bad reading with shot shells. The goal here is to get a reading before that shot string opens up. The second thing is to not use wad stripping chokes like a pattern master. You want the shot inside the wad for as long as possible when you're shooting it through a chronograph. The longer the shot string, the more inaccurate the reading will be. So don't use a wad stripping choke readings today. With that out of the way, let's get some highly questionable velocity readings through a cheap chronograph. So how accurate was the advertised velocity of these shells? Well, according to my chronograph, which may or may not be off, they were all off a little bit. They were all a little short here. The Bosch shells were pretty much the closest to the advertised velocity, and the Kents were the worst. And since I had the average pellet weight and the average pellet velocity, I was able to calculate pellet muzzle energy. And Boss won easily in this category. In the final section of this chart is value. Basically, does the quality and performance match the price that they're charging? As you can see from this chart, Boss shot shells not only have better quality and performance, but they're also significantly cheaper than the other brands of bismuth shells. The big shocker here for me is actually hevi-bismuth, which had the poorest quality and was a poor performer, but it has the biggest price tag by a large margin. Yeah, this comparison proved that Boss makes a great shell at a fair price, but the biggest takeaway for me is to stay away from hevi-bismuth. Actually, I think I'll stay away from all their products at this point. Based purely on their marketing and the people that were hyping up Boss shells, I really didn't hold them in high regard for a while. I never badmouthed Boss shot shells, but I certainly didn't go out of my way to recommend them on my channel either. Browsing through their website is like talking to a 16-year-old jacked up on Monster energy drinks. Even the packaging looks like an ad straight out of, the movie Idiocracy. Boxes of 20 shells, 3/4-inch magnums, money bags, and Bossmen. Come on, please. But in the end, I was completely wrong for not using Boss shot shells earlier. They sell a good product at what I consider a fair price. The company has fantastic customer service and delivers on promises, which is exceedingly rare in the ammunition industry. Unlike other ammo companies, when you call Boss, you talk to a real Boss employee here in the United States, not a call center in India. And I also really love Boss's business model of only selling directly to the hunter. Going through distributors and retailers only raises the prices for the consumer, and it kills the manufacturer's profit margins at the same time, which ultimately forces them to sacrifice quality. As long as Boss keeps doing what they're doing, I think they'll remain outside that sad reality. At least I hope that's the case. I also like that Boss isn't sponsoring anybody or putting YouTube influencers on their pro staff. Basically their attitude is, if you try our shells, you'll keep using them. And in the end, their marketing didn't grab me, rather their products did. I shoot hundreds of rounds of, I shot, I'd say hundreds, maybe 1,000 rounds of Boss shells this season in demanding field conditions out of various over and unders and semi-automatic shotguns. And I never had one misfire. I didn't have one stuck shell, and I didn't experience one shell that wouldn't cycle. So I'd say they're pretty damn reliable too. My only issue with Boss was just the difficulty of patterning the shells and the poor performance I experienced with the number 7s. But that was really my only gripe. So I guess I'm on the Boss shot shell bandwagon now. Congratulations, that's not easy to do. My viewers know that I don't have any sponsors and I don't give fluff reviews for companies. If you gain my admiration, it was earned, and Boss shot shells has earned my respect. And I hope they keep it up and don't let quality slip as they become more popular. We all know that story too well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, click the subscribe button and check out my other videos. You could follow me by hitting my Insta at Desert Dog Hunting. You can also contact me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.